Hello, inmates. Welcome to the cellblock Scorch week 227A. Guess what? This is our 50th content episode. Milestones. So this is Bones, and I am recording as the winner of this week's Scorch. It's been a hot minute, and that's because I forgot to mention in the Week 18 Scorch, but that was the last time I won before I left the Scorch for a year and a half. So you won't hear from me in the Wednesday episodes for a long while, literally until Week 81. But luckily, due to the nature of our releases, I will still be popping up on Saturdays. And as always, as the editor, I will sometimes break into other people's episodes because, they can't stop me. That's my prerogative. Ha ha ha. Anyway, back to our actual content. This week's prompt was given by Cricket, and it was, "Now kindly take your hijinks and leave." So this prompt was really fun for me because it gave me the opportunity to write about a group of characters I'd created in an earlier Scorch and really enjoyed. Unfortunately, because of how we're releasing these, it's going to be a while before you get to hear it, but this actually takes place earlier in the timeline than that one, so you won't need to know about it to get what's happening here. But anyway, I will tell you more about the universe and such after the story. For now, let's just jump in. The name of this Scorch is Gotcha. I found one, Bora. Drea, inside the bar, felt his shoulders tense as he recognized the voice that he wished deeply had escaped his notice. Oh, the cursed existence of recognizing Krasha's voice. "Looks familiar," boomed Bora's voice, his footsteps falling hard enough to shake the tavern floor. "You sure we haven't been banned from here?" Even as he questioned it, they entered the tavern without hesitation. "Not yet," Krasha reported cheerfully, and Drea didn't have to look to know her eyes were sparkling as she did. He was too busy hunching over, trying to bury himself in his brown hood, eyes darting around, hoping there was a second exit. But of course there wasn't. Just the one that Bora's hulking body was blocking entirely. "Adventurers!" Several of the regulars in the tavern perked up at the newcomers, raising their tankards in greeting. Drea cursed his luck, as those people were at the table right next to his. He hunched further, shoveling his food into his mouth as quickly as possible. The energy of the tavern was already changing. He could feel it in the uncomfortable prickling in the air. Excitement, some others would call it, but mostly it felt nauseous to Drea. It happened whenever these two showed up. A nice, calm afternoon eating dinner in the tavern before the usual dinner rush and rowdy drinking crowd would inexplicably turn into a writhing mosh pit of drunkards, singing the moment those two entered the vicinity. And Drea wanted nothing to do with it. "Markle, Hilde, Pocana, Chotiv!" Krasha greeted them all by name, strutting over and pressing a kiss on the cheek to every one that didn't protest immediately. A peck much closer to the lips for Hilde, accompanied by a playful wink that sent the girl blushing. Drea buried his face in his hands and cursed his unfortunate choice of tables and seats, sending a quick prayer to the singular deity to forgive him for being in such crude company, even by accident, and to plead that they not notice him. The buzz of voices in the tavern had already risen to a dull roar, and they had been here not 30 seconds yet, so he simply had to hold out until the chaos fully descended, and then escape. "Crush!" Bora called, his enormous hand smacking her back to get her attention. It was nearly as large as her torso, and yet she hardly moved under the sudden impact. A combination of years traveling together and the fact that she could probably bench press him. "Isn't that the guy? The wood magic one?" Drea's blood ran cold. "Drea!" Krasha greeted immediately. "A druid boar," she reminded her companion with a good-natured elbow to his hip, the easiest place to reach due to his stature. before turning on a dime and flopping into the chair next to Drea. "Now, what's a nice guy like you doing in a place like this?" "It was nice before you got here," Drea muttered. "Oh, stop. I'm blushing." Krasha giggled as if he had just given her a compliment. "So, have you decided to help us yet?" Despite thinking it impossible, Drea tensed even further as Bora swept away the chairs on his other side and plopped down on the floor, head still surpassing Drea's in height. He eyed the giant's bengled arms with distaste and hunched away from Krasha's arm being thrown around his shoulders. She retracted it quickly, holding her hands up in surrender. "Can't you find some other druid?" he complained, frowning at his plate, wishing he hadn't eaten it all earlier so he could have some excuse not to speak. You'd think that they would have gotten bored of following him around and pestering him to join their party for nigh on a month now, but they really seemed to be thriving hanging out in this town, doing nothing in the meantime. He couldn't go an hour without hearing another story about how Bora used one of his pagan-blessed bangles to aid around town, or how Krasha had seduced another townsperson with a combination of wit, audacity, and her accursedly magnetic personality. The whole town was raving about them. And yet, they didn't care about anything but harassing Drea, the only person in the town who didn't like them in the least. "Why?" Bora frowned, raising his voice to be heard over the crowd of people suddenly and inexplicably gathered around them. "We like you." "Like me?" Drea groaned to himself, dropping his head to the table. Why on earth would they possibly like him? All he'd done was ignore them and obviously judge their religious beliefs, or lack thereof. "Another keg!" Krasha yelled, to the cacophonous cheering of the others surrounding them. Then, as a whisper in Drea's ear, "Watch this. It's gonna be hilarious." That was the quickest way to get Drea to bolt upright, eyes flicking around in a panic as he tried to figure out what on earth Krasha had decided to do to these poor people. "This one's on us," Bora announced, slapping the top of the keg cheerfully, and anyone else would have missed the way one of the bangles on his arms glowed faintly. "What is he—" Drea tried to stand, only for Krasha to pull him back down by the shoulder and fix him with a feral grin. "Hey there, ya. Calm down. It's harmless," she whispered, and Drea's mouth snapped shut despite himself. Between the unwarranted nickname and the hand squeezing just a bit too tightly on his shoulder, speaking up seemed like a bad idea. Everyone drank merrily, the noise increasing as Bora and Krasha egged the others on. No one but Drea seemed to notice that they each ordered their drinks separately instead of drinking from the keg they'd ordered. "What did you do?" Drea hissed when Bora collapsed down after leading the patrons in a rousing song. "You ever hear of Sritz?" Bora asked cheerfully in response, not bothering to keep his voice down. Drea was sure that was one of the old gods, but couldn't possibly guess who. Luckily, one of the patrons had overheard and seemed more than willing to enlighten everyone. "Sritz," she repeated, speech somewhat slurred. "Now that's a goddess. She rules over all beasts. She rides on an enormous bull and is attended by miniature elephants," she lectured, making grand gestures as everyone watched. "It's said that she emerged from the spring of life after Kitro, the creator, realized that the world wasn't whole with only the environment. No animals of the water, land, or air." Some of the drunkards started sniggering among themselves, stifling their giggles and pointing in what they clearly thought was a surreptitious manner at the woman who was still enthusiastically detailing the creation of the original animals. She had cat ears. As the center of attention, that was who everyone noticed, but Drea noticed that everyone who had drunk from the keg was beginning to exhibit some animal characteristics. A man with a dog's tail, a woman with tusks, a patron whose nails had grown into claws. Once they started looking at each other, they began to notice. The normal drunken chatter was interrupted by two starkly different reactions. Those who laughed, and those who began to freak out. Bora and Krasha, of course, were laughing loudest of them all, and Drea attempted to shrink into the ground between them. He nearly sprung into the air when a hand landed on his shoulder from behind. "This was hilarious." The owner of the tavern smiled at the three of them. "Now kindly take your hijinks and leave." "Wait, I'm not—" Despite his protests, Drea found himself outside of the tavern with Krasha and Bora on either side. This was the first time he'd ever been kicked out of an establishment. "I can't believe you two," he gaped. "First time, huh?" Bora asked in faux sympathy, a pat on the back nearly sending Drea crumpling. "Don't worry," Krasha smirked, saving him from falling and holding him to her side. "You'll get used to it. But now, it's time to work." Wait, I haven't," Drea protested, but it was useless to try to pull away as she dragged him down the street. "We're low on money after all this charity work trying to get you to join us," Bora explained. "Charity work? You call that charity work?" "It's close enough," Krasha chirped, and Drea had a sinking feeling that he'd have to deal with this duo for a very, very long time.
Hi again, Cricket here for Judge Comments on Week 2, 27A. I promise after this you're not going to hear from me so much. Just June had a weird coincidence of me having a whole bunch of things to record and to talk about. I get a break now though. Anyway, 227A, this was so fun. Like I said last time, I looked at my group, which was Red, Octo, and Bones, and I said, hijinks. And I was so correct. All three of them delivered. Their pieces are all so funny and so interesting. Bones, I think, just got me in particular because I loved the world they built and these characters. I thought it was so funny to think of these two adventurers being like, that's the person we need, and just pursuing this druid so intently, and poor Drea just being like, these guys are ruining my peaceful existence. I also think I just love Krasha and Bora as a duo. They're so chaotic and so fun. I just had a delightful time with this piece. I would read so much more about them. Oh yeah, something that I also thought was funny was that Drea's name fits their group pattern. Krasha, Bora, Drea. So obviously it's fate and he is destined to stay with them forever. I hope you all also thought this piece was very funny. It's so chaotic. It's so delightful. And I hope y'all enjoyed.
Yep, that's the Scorch. It's, of course, a sort of forming the D&D group type vibe. Drea's right in his last assumption that fortunately, he will have to deal with Bora and Krasha's antics for a very long time. And the world it's set in, I think, can be seen as generally having very similar rules to a typical D&D type world. So, yeah, the basic characters, we've got Drea. He's a human druid. He worships the singular deity, which both words are capitalized in, by the way. And then we've got Krasha, who I legitimately don't know what she is. Like, it would probably make sense if she was an elf, given that she's beautiful and can bench press a half-giant, but I kind of hate elves, and I refuse, so she'll probably end up being a different creature entirely. And she doesn't believe in anything but herself, and she hasn't been disappointed yet, so no reason to change that. And finally we have Bora. He is a half-giant, and he worships the old gods. Also all capitalized, by the way. T-O-N-G, the old gods. In this piece, it mentioned that one of the bangles on his arms glowed, and then he cursed the ale. And then they brought up the old god named Sritz. the goddess of beasts, right? So I didn't explain it much because I went more into it in my initial piece about them, so everyone in the Scorch had some kind of idea. But since that's not going to show up for a while, as I said, I'll explain it a bit now. So Bora worships the old gods, and there are a lot of them. And he decided that the best way to do it was to get a bangle for each of them, inscribe a sigil for each god on them, and then imbue them with spells that have to do with each god's domain. So for Sritz, goddess of beasts, he has one that he can use to give others animal characteristics. And some of them are like super useful spells, and some of them are ones that everyone kind of makes fun of him for having. For instance, the messenger god, I can't remember what their name is, but the bangle for them has a spell that literally moves you 10 feet and then returns you to the same place you were after like 5 seconds. So it's like you move 10 feet and then you're back 5 seconds later. So people make fun of that a lot, but actually it's been very helpful. But anyway, that's beside the point. He has so many of these. His arms are absolutely covered because there are so many old gods, and they're made of really sturdy metal. So on top of him already being massive, the metal coating really just makes it really hard for people to not be crushed under his arm when he gives them a friendly pat. So imagine that whenever Bora, forgets that he's 5 times bigger than everyone else in the room. He is not only 5 times bigger, but he has coated himself in metal that makes him heavier. So yeah, this is an extended universe. It's tagged on the Patreon as The Old Gods, so I'm sure you can guess which of the characters' belief systems we'll be focusing on. We get a lot of humorously depicted religious crises, sure, why not, from all our characters, though, so it's fun. Anyway, so far I've written 2 other Scorches for this, weeks 130 and 160, and the first of which is a Scorch you'll hear far in the future, and the second is an Ember you'll eventually be able to read on the Patreon. And that's pretty much all I had to say about these people, so these characters make me happy, and I hope you enjoyed them as well. And then my prompt for week 228A was the quote, "I just feel like I can trust you." And then in parentheses afterwards, "They are wrong." Clearly, this could be read humorously or dramatically. I'm gonna be honest, I'm too weak for betrayal plot lines. They hurt me. So when it's played dramatically, I'm so sad the whole time. It's very tragic. And I understand that that's the point, but like, I can't deal with it. But when it's played for comedy, it's one of my very favorite tropes. And it's like, of course, a really common idea, but I think I prompted it this week because I had just started a new plot bunny in which the main concept is this. Someone is like, "I just feel like I can trust you," and then they're completely wrong about it. In this case, it was someone who has amnesia, and they're like worst enemy. But she's fun, so it's okay. It's just amusing and possibly disastrous. Anyway, I've written about those guys a little bit for the Scorch, so you'll see them eventually on the podcast. But yeah, that's all I had to say about that. So anyway, thank you all for listening. If you like a story, consider sharing it with your friends and family. Check out our Patreon and get some extra content for free, or subscribe to read our Embers. And check out our social media. Red's been having a ball with both the Tumblr and Instagram, so if you use those, you should show her some love. And, most importantly, keep your fires burning. The Cellblock Scorch is a production of Stellacore, an independent group of nerds sharing their obsessions with the world. We can be reached at thestellacore@gmail.com, through comments on your podcast platform of choice, our Instagram, Stella_core, and at our YouTube, also called Stellacore. Feel free to check out our other productions on our YouTube channel or our cosplays on Instagram. If you would like to support our creative endeavors, you can give a one-time tip to the Ko-Fi of the writer of your favorite Scorches, or check out our Patreon, linked in the show notes. There, you can access the winning Scorches and episode transcripts for free, or sign up for Spark level support for $5 a month to gain access to all of the Scorch submissions.